The Forgotten Frame. Caliban got the Pablo juice sprinkled onto him, but will these changes make him a worthy contender? What's good, folks? It's Nightmare Frame here with a new Warframe video coming at you with a Caliban rework, or should I say CALICHAD. I have 3 builds here for you, ready to go, but first let's have a look at the new Caliban kits. What type of frame is Caliban? One thing people have to understand, he isn't a nuke. He isn't a tank, nor is he a support. He is an enabler / utility frame. His kit has a lot of things that make him playable and dominant on the field. Like, you will know there's a Caliban on your team. He has great survivability tools, great crowd control, and amazing debuffs to help him scale his weapon damage. He does have everything you need to trivialize the steel path and other activities. So, let's go over his kit so you can get a better understanding. His passive still remains the same. He gives an aura of damage type adaptation, allowing him to adapt to damage and can share this with allies. This is not status effect resistance, do not confuse that, but adapting to damage types that are being dealt to you. His aura unfortunately caps out at 50% of damage adaptation. It isn't as strong as the adaptation mod, as they are 2 different things and function as separate instances, and they do not stack. So if you adapt to a damage type, the higher value will always take priority, meaning adaptation will always be stronger than his passive. This means you don't have to run adaptation or rolling guard if you're doing simple things in Steel Path, as his passive paired with the shield regeneration is more than enough survivability. His first ability, Razor Gyre, has Caliban move forward in a spinning motion, hitting anything that is around him with a cylindrical shape, so enemies above and below can get hit, because you can also use this ability mid-air. Enemies hit suffer the Tau status effect. This is a new status effect that has enemies become vulnerable to status effect, meaning it increases the status application received from all sources. Really good with any damage over time status effect damage. His first ability also regenerates shields, health, and energy. Let's start with the energy regen. This functions similar to Nidus's Virulence. Enemies hit with this ability will regenerate energy, and if you expend a lot of energy with one cast, you will get a large amount back. So having less efficiency and hitting a lot of enemies will let you an infinite energy rotation. The health and shield regen does have a priority order. You cannot regenerate shields if your health is low, so you will always regenerate health first before it gives you shields. Thanks to shield gating, your health will always be topped up, so you can have an infinite amount of shield regen, and this shield regen can overstack into overshields. The second ability got the least amount of change, but it is way better now. This ability releases a wave that travels forward, dealing damage to anything it comes into contact with, and surviving enemies will be debuffed and crowd controlled, making them vulnerable to all incoming damage as they're suspended mid-air. This also counts as a lifted status effect, which synergizes with other weapons and his first ability, having it deal more damage to lifted enemies. The best part is that they removed the enemy cap, so it can hit as many as you want. The debuff not only makes them vulnerable, but also applies the Tau status effect. The shockwave emitted from this ability can track enemies as it travels up certain terrain with a small line of sight check. Meaning, if you're completely behind a wall, you cannot hit enemies beyond that wall. Casting the ability again will continue to suspend enemies. Lethal Progeny, his third ability, got a huge change and feels bloated. Instead of summoning each sentient individually to cap out at 3, now you have 3 options of different breeds of sentients to summon. And with one cast, all 3 of them come out. Conculist, the melee sentience. Ortholist, the range sentience, and Sumulist, a sentient that opens up their palm to summon little baby sentients. All sentients summoned will restore Caliban's shields over time, and only works if Caliban has shields to begin with, so it doesn't work when your shields break. You can use the first ability to regenerate shields to synergize with the shield upkeep from the sentients. They also deal 10 times more damage to any non-sentient enemy. They scale off Caliban's strength, Warframe rank, and health values. Unfortunately, they do not scale with enemy level. I don't why. The melee sentients deal slash damage as they spin around, while also having the chance to proc bleeds, and synergizes with the 4th ability to spread it out more, as they can cast it along with you to increase the damage dealt and spread the attack more. The range units will shoot out attacks that deal Tau and apply the Tau status effect. They can also plant themselves to the ground and turn into a mortar turret. The Baby Maker is just there to face tank enemies for you, as they have a higher aggro level. So if you're very skill issue and you want some survivability, they're pretty good. But unfortunately, they can die. And if the baby sentients die, the mama sentient can summon more. And finally, Fusion Strike, the fourth ability, is pretty much the same, but has slightly faster animation. And you still want to use casting speed shards because, let's be honest, letting animations shine is bad and will get you killed. Each beam released by Caliban will deal Tau damage to anything that comes into contact with it, and converges to one impact point that is aimed by your reticle. And when the beams explode, they leave behind a field that strips enemies' defenses permanently. That means shields and armor. You need a total of 200% strength for a full strip, but you can cast it multiple times for a full strip. Although, with the corrosive projection aura, you can take the full defense shred strength requirement down to 164%. The biggest issue with this ability when it comes to dealing damage is collision and line of sight. If you're using this ability for DPSing, then it will suck in a majority of Warframe maps and tile sets, as every wall or hard terrain will obstruct your beam contact. And yes, this also applies to your progeny. Like if you watch the Pablo video with Caliban, it's kind of funny that they were in a very open map and not inside those crazy narrow Warframe tile sets. So it's better to relegate this ability to doing two things: supplementary damage and defense shredding. Because if you really want to kill something, just use your weapons. So, as I said earlier, I have 3 builds for you guys, and they all utilize the most overused Helminth abilities in the game, because it just works. Roar, Nourish, and Breach Surge. They will use the same Archon Shards because no Archon Shard loadout exists yet. Come on, DE, hurry up. 2 Tau Forge casting speed shards is mandatory for this guy. He feels so slow, even with the tweaks. And 1 red Tau to round off his strength, saving me a mod slot. The 2 slots are empty there because they can be whatever you want. Let's go in alphabetical order, starting off with Breach Surge. This Helminth is pretty simple yet devastating. It stuns enemies, but redundant with his second ability on them, but it also synergizes with his second ability for an amazing damage spread. You'll be seeing millions of damage ticks, as enemies are stripped from their defenses while having a damage vulnerability that amplifies Surge Spark damage to taxi off the debuffed enemy to deal even more damage to the next target. Simple combo of your second ability to lift them up, proc Breach Surge, and then follow up with your 4th ability. This will kill fodder units, and the ones that are still alive just fire a weapon. I highly recommend using the melee units because they can add more beams to hit more enemies, and you're likely to hit 1 or 2 enemies in the head to trigger the Surge Sparks. Otherwise, for a more consistent weapon DPS combo, use your 4th ability, following up with the second, and then Breach Surge, to then finish them off, not like that, but kill them off with your weapons. Alright, let's have a look at that build. Alright, taking a look at the first build utilizing Breach Surge as my Helminth. First things first, the Arcanes. I do have Arcane Energize here for that energy regen upon energy pickup. Since this build is going to utilize a lot of ability spam, we need some energy sustain. So this is a solid Arcane for this build. Now, the second Arcane can be whatever you want. If you feel like you need a bit more energy sustain, you can go with Steadfast. You want some shields, you can go with Arcane Aegis. And if you do want some additional crit, Arcane Avenger, it's an open slot. If you want to take that strength to the next level, well, simply run Molt Augmented. You have so many options for this slot. It is an empty slot. But the one requirement is that Arcane Energize. Now, for the aura, I'll be running Growing Power. This gives me 25% strength when I trigger a status effect on an enemy using my weapons, not abilities. And for the Exilus, you want to get that foot maxing mod because spending less time in your butt is a huge DPS increase. I have 2 Vs here, but first let's start off with the strength increases. I'll be running Umbral Intensify here with that 45% increase, and then adding Transient Fortitude. Now, this gives me 214 strength with that 15 from the Tau Forge, and I'll be getting 25 here, but I do lose some duration, and this is where I use Prime Continuity to counteract the negative duration. Now, if you want, you could change this Transient Fortitude to 1 rank off the max, so you can still get 130% duration, but you will still have 200% strength, enough for a full strip. For the 3 dashes, it's all going to be about energy maintenance and range. So let's start off with that juicy prime flow for that large energy pool, going from 190 to 541. Equilibrium for the energy and health orb conversion. And remember, I do have those 2 empty slots for Archon Shards, so if you want to replace this, you can use the 2 purple Tau Forge to give you a weaker version of Equilibrium, so it can be whatever you want. Now the 2 slots left for range, Stretch and Augur Reach. Both of these will give me 175% range. This increases the coverage on Breach Surge to 31 meters, which is insane. The reach of my Sentient Wrath reaching up to 43.75 meters. And of course, Fusion Strike gives me a nice radius, so everything within that radius is then armor strip. And then finally, for survivability, I'll be adding Primed Redirection. He has adaptation for his passive, and he has amazing shield regen with his sentience and a sentinel that can also boost that shield regen. And this is the Breach Surge build. And for the weapon I decided to use was the Teenet Arca Plasmir. So with my Plasmir, I do have bonus Toxin. You always want to go with Toxin for this weapon. The reason being is that you can mix and match elements to form corrosive, viral, and gas with just one mod. And the weapon itself has innate radiation. Now the build is fairly simple. You want your base damage, or you can replace this with faction damage mod. Your crit chance, crit damage, elemental damage. I'm using Prime Charge Shell here with a bonus Toxin. It gives me that large corrosive damage increase. Prime Ammo Stock for the large magazine because we need it. Fire rate, very important for this weapon. And then Galvanized Savvy, as this applies as a final damage multiplier on its projectiles. And the Arcane can be whatever you want depending on what you're using. Again, if you want to switch this out to a faction mod, Primary Merciless is going to be your best bet. Other useful arcane could be Fractalized Reset, which gives you that massive reload speed, or even Shotgun Vendetta. When killing enemies, you get that reload speed and multi-shot. For the Sentinel, I'll be running a Worm Prime throughout, and this is your all-rounder build. You want to have Guardian and Negate, Tenacious and Reinforced Bond for the fire rate and the crit damage increase. And for the weapon here, I'll be using the Volcox. The only reason I'm using this is because it's easy to maintain that crit chance increase, so I can get bonus crit damage with Tenacious Bond. And since it's a primary, I can put the Vigilante mods over here to increase my chances of getting a higher critical tier. And with critical delay, I'm over 50% crit chance. Simple as that. For the Nourish setup, this is a viral elemental damage multiplier that is applied to your weapons, certain abilities, and can be shared with allies. Of course, your progeny are considered allies and can gain the damage buff as well. Not only that, this buffs your weapon so you can have interesting elemental combinations on them, while also having an energy multiplier, meaning going negative efficiency won't be an issue at all. I also recommend using the melee units for this build, as it will help you apply more fusion strike hits and have them deal even more damage. Alright, the second build that uses Nourish as its Helminth is going to be pretty similar to the Breach Surge one, but I'm changing out 3 things. The 3 things that I'm changing out are going to be the Arcanes and the Strength mod. I'll be going with Blind Rage here instead of Transient Fortitude, so I can have better duration and a lot more strength. Strength is very important for Nourish because, of course, it increases your damage and it increases that energy multiplier. And for the Arcanes, I'll be running Bolt Augmented here because I do not need Arcane Energize because Nourish is my energy multiplier. And then finally, Molt Efficiency here to give me 36% duration if I have shields active. And that's pretty much it. However, I will be using a different weapon in this case. So the Proboscis Cernos is a bow that when you shoot out, you have these tendrils that spawn and synergize pretty well with Armor Strip. So you got your Armor Strip here, you have Nourish, shoot out the bow. It's going to deal that viral gas electric. Its radial explosion already deals viral, but I have it modded for gas as well and electric. So it's going to deal viral, gas, and electric. And with Nourish, my viral damage is going to be a lot stronger. So the build is fairly straightforward. I did have the wrong faction, but I still killed him pretty easily. Multi-shot Firestorm for the large explosion. I have my 2 mods here to form gas. However, the proc priority does scale with the elemental damage. In this case, I'm just using this for utility to drag in enemies, and boom. You can even go with a simple Exceltra build here, modded for corrosive, and you already have viral on your weapon. Proc that, Armor Strip, and you're gonna kill them pretty easily. So the weapons can be whatever you want. And finally, Roar. This is a universal damage multiplier that can be applied to your weapons and abilities, boosting the damage of your weapons and doubling the damage over time of status effects, as it functions like a faction mod. This also helps boost your progeny damage. I will be replacing the 4th ability in favor of Roar to utilize Precision Intensify. I will not need Armor Strip because it is a very mobile build. I'll be using the range units to help boost my status effect spreading, and this will be a melee focused build that has a very high KPM as it utilizes melee influence. So let's have a look. The third and last build that uses Roar as its Helminth ability. Now there's a few things that changed on the build as well. You have similar mods to the previous builds. I'm still using Blind Rage, but I did change out a couple of mods and Arcane. Now for added survivability, you can do 2 things. You can add Rolling Guard for that iframe when you dodge roll, and of course it cleanses you of status effects. Or you can even go with Fast Deflection for even more shield recharge. This is up to you. However, for the strength increase to take it to the next level, especially affecting my Roar, I will be running Precision Intensify. This adds 90% strength to my 4th ability, and that 4th ability is going to be Roar. So now without any conditional strength increases like Growing Power, Molt Augmented, or even Matter-Eye, this starts off at 91%. This is already stronger than your primed faction damage mods. And because this is heavily focused on melee, I want to be running Arcane Strike. Strike gives me 60% attack speed when I hit an enemy. It doesn't matter on what type of hit, as long as you hit an enemy, you have a 50% chance on getting attack speed. So this is easily done with your abilities as well. And for this setup, I'll be using the range sentience because they're going to be priming enemies with the Tau status effect. And because I want a larger boost to my Roar, I'll also be using the Tome that increases my strength by 60%. So let's go in here, summon my sentience, use my alternate fire on the Tome at 40% from Matter-Eye, 60% from the Tome, and then cast Roar, and we already have 129. Easily killing these enemies without any effort. Of course, for even more power, let's even show it against Xmas units. Go in there, get them primed with Tau. They're all dead. And the weapon of choice here is the Amanata. This is the new melee weapon that came with Kolme. So, unique trait states you have a chance of getting any of these buffs when you hit enemies with your melee strikes. The Arcane is going to be melee influence, of course, so that's why I have it modded for Viral and Electric. And I'm using its unique base damage mod. So this gives me a base damage of 330%, which is already stronger than Prime Pressure Point. However, if you want, you could stack Condition Overload and this mod. However, you cannot stack Prime Pressure Point with this mod. But since we have enough base damage and a lot of debuffs and Armor Strip, there was no need to run Condition Overload or anything like that. So besides getting the base damage increase, when your combo multiplier reaches 8 times, performing a heavy attack applies a random status effect to enemies. And I'll be easily heavy attacking thanks to Tennokai with Discipline's Merit. Tennokai allows me to perform heavy attacks free of charge without consuming my combo and grants me faster wind-up speed. And to increase my chances of proccing status effects and having my status effects do more damage, I do have Weeping Wounds and Galvanize Elementalist. Galvanize Elementalist status chance is additive to Weeping Wounds. However, that status damage is multiplicative to faction damage. And the status damage I'll be dealing is electric. I'll be easily debuffing them with my second ability, Viral, and the Tau status effect. So my electricity can deal even more damage. Anyway, folks, that has been it from this Caliban rework video. I do hope you enjoyed and learned something from it. If you did, please feel free to leave a like, share, and subscribe for more Warframe content, streams, and so much more. Do refer to the description. Thanks for watching. As always, a peace. Bye-bye now.